Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Chairman, Secretary General, dear friends, I listened with great interest the two keynotes also before, and I was very much in liking with them. I liked very much what Eric was underlining, the issues related to facts. I think facts, especially in today's world, are becoming more and more of an important commodity, and we should not lightly have a light relationship with them. I think we have to take that very seriously. And it is very important that we also base our policies on good facts. Second aspect, dialogue and cooperation. I think this is also very important, and it's very important from our side as regulators to be there to listen and to have good partnerships and to listen to all sides, and then, of course, try to find the best possible compromise where nobody is too happy with. Because if somebody is too happy, then you haven't been really listening. And also, I thank you very much for your positive words about the recent mobility package. And I think, again, it was a good display of those two elements that I just mentioned, the facts and good cooperation. Mr. Chairman, also with great interest I listened to your speech, and I'm going to disappoint you because I know that I was just finishing mine, so you couldn't have had it, but it's not going to be that different. So your 3 points, as you will see, will be very much embedded of what I'm about to say. But let me start from more further and give you a more bigger picture. So just some reminders. We all know that transport is the backbone of our economy. Sector employs more than 11 million Europeans, generates about 5% of Europe's GDP, and there shouldn't be absolutely no doubt that transport actually matters. It matters to us, to our daily lives, and to the opportunities we have or do not have. Sometimes you kind of think that maybe policymakers do not put enough attention to transport, and if that happens, that's usually because they take it too much for granted. And I think it's also our job to remind about that, and also to try to show what if the transport system doesn't deliver as efficiently as it does today and as seamlessly as it does today. Yes, there are many bottlenecks and obstacles, and we are trying to overcome them, but we do have a good network in place, and we need to make sure that it is also well understood. Road transport accounts for almost half of the total freight activity. From 2010-2050, it's estimated that passenger transport will grow about 42% and freight almost close to 60%. So I think we are talking about quite high figures. And in Europe, transport is 94% dependent on oil, 84% which is imported. I think that's an important point as well. So when we talk about the decarbonisation, I think we actually also talk about the independency. So when we talk about the decarbonisation, it also means really being less dependent on foreign exports and having more favourable balance of payments in the end of the day. With the Paris Agreement in force, we must face the challenge of emissions and climate change. Commercial vehicles clearly have to deliver their contribution, and I think that what we have also heard and seen today, there is no doubt that the manufacturers are very keen to engage and to deliver that. The Commission President, Mr. Juncker, in his State of Union address, already made it very clear. EU should become the world leader in decarbonisation as part of a renewed industry policy strategy. In its low-emission mobility strategy, the Commission has set 3 clear priorities: to improve overall efficiency of the transportation system, to increase the share of the low-emission alternative fuels, and to accelerate the transition to low and zero-emission vehicles. As the Commission, we have always stated that we remain technologically neutral within the overall low-emission mobility framework. So I only not heard you, I also saw, but also let me reassure you that in DG Move, we really mean it. We do definitely not know yet what would be the best technology in the future. And we must keep open mind and level playing field for all technologies to develop. It's the end of the day, the market who is going to fix that. And I think that we need to be there to provide the level playing field. So what you had also in the short and well-made movie, I very much agree with that. The powertrains of the future will need to combine a mix of relevant innovative technologies in both conventional and alternative fuels. And this is particularly relevant for commercial vehicles where different market segments are at different stages of market maturity for the application of alternative fuels technologies. Advanced biofuels need to play their role to reduce reliance on fossil fuels also in the future, because biofuels are one of the few options to replace oil-based fuels for heavy-duty vehicles, together with liquefied natural gas blended with biomethane and substituting kerosene in aviation. Battery and fuel cell electric car solutions are further down the line for trucks, while they are starting to strongly shape the future of the bus market already today. And again, that was also portrayed in the movie. EU manufacturers are global leaders in competition. However, of course, you all well know that better than I, that complacency is not an option. We see that new powertrain technologies are being developed and introduced in the market by new players, both in the US and Asia. So stepping up action is very relevant. Europe cannot lag behind. On the contrary, it must be in the lead of the process. It's also relevant in view of the action taken at local levels to restrict access to certain parts of cities for conventionally fueled vehicles. When we talk about powertrain options in the future, it's important to keep in mind that we address vehicles, infrastructures, and consumer needs together. That's why the Commission has been packaging its initiatives in 2017. As you well remember, end of May this year, the Commission adopted the first mobility package, including important messages for the socially fair transition to clean transport system and focusing on delivering better functioning road transport market. Just 3 weeks ago, we followed track with the second mobility package, which was also referred to, setting out important policy initiatives on clean passenger cars and vans and alternative fuels infrastructure. We will follow up with the third mobility package in the first half of next year, as was also already indicated by our moderator. As you may have heard, the Commission plans to include a legislative proposal setting the CO2 standards and for the buses and coaches as well. Let me take this moment to update you on the proposal that the Commission updated in November to address the CO2 performance of passenger cars and vans. First of all, this proposal establishes ambitious yet realistic CO2 emission standards for the new cars and vans. For the new cars and vans, the average CO2 emissions will have to be 30% lower in 2030 compared to 2021. The proposal also sets an intermediate reduction target of 15% for 2025. This will ensure that investments are kick-started now, while the 2030 target gives stability and long-term direction to keep up these investments. Know that for the industry, it's actually very important to have the predictability and the stability. And of course, we sincerely believe that now we have, with this proposal, and of course, once it will be adopted, we have created a framework which also allows to do the investments, having well in mind the framework that is there for the overall delivery. Secondly, the proposal includes an innovative incentive system to make sure clean cars and vans enter into the market, and it was also talked about the need for the incentivization. We have proposed benchmarks of how many clean vehicles each manufacturer ideally should put on the market. As you well know, they are 15% for 2025, 30% 2030. If a manufacturer chooses to produce more clean vehicles than these benchmarks, they will be rewarded in the form of less stringent CO2 target. The third element of the proposal is a better enforcement of the rules. The CO2 emission values from the type approval tests need to be correct and representative of average real-world emissions. We have proposed new measures to check that cars and vans being put on the road will have the same emission standards as those that were also tested. Together, this policy provides a needed long-term certainty for the market, and it is really needed for all market participants, as predictability is the key in developing new technologies and new solutions. Investments into commercial vehicle technologies should be safeguarded by similar long-term policy certainty. Investments into vehicle technologies need to be met also by sufficient demand. Public procurement can provide an important market stimulus, and I think that what was earlier also said is that for the manufacturers it's important that their customers also are keen to purchase these products. That is why we presented our proposal for amending the Clean Vehicles Directive. It includes requirements for public procurement of heavy-duty vehicles such as urban buses or waste refusal trucks. Importantly, we include a definition of clean vehicles and set minimum procurement targets at member state level for the minimum shares of clean, alternatively fueled buses and trucks to be procured by 2025 and 2030. Particularly in this area of urban buses, where public demand is a key driver, the revision will lead to an increased stable market demand. At least that is what we would be expecting from that. Now we come to, I think, also one of the other key aspects, and this is the alternative fuels infrastructure. You know, the directive provides a common framework for delivery of infrastructure based on common standards and consumer information for alternative energy. But we currently see that, unfortunately, the national policy frameworks that were submitted by the member states under this directive do really not add up to the level of ambition and policy coherence. If clean, light, and heavy-duty vehicles should increase their share in the overall vehicle stock, the infrastructure for their recharging and refueling simply needs to be in place. To put it simply, we need to step up the action. In the last package, we also adopted the EU Action Plan. That was also referred to already as alternative fuels infrastructure. It supports establishing a backbone charging infrastructure which will cover the TEN-T network by 2025. And I think that this is also the right way to go, because having the TEN-T policy as a major policy framework for our infrastructure policy, and using the TEN-T corridors also as real multimodal, sustainable and smart corridors, this is the right place to make sure the availability of the alternative fuel infrastructure is delivered. We will take action to ensure that this infrastructure and its services are interoperable, very, very important, and hence easy to use across borders. You know, the big problem in Europe always is a fantastic market. We even have the single market. Everything is supposed to work. When you cross the border, things don't work anymore. And that is something that we just cannot have. And we also need to make sure that the interoperability and cross-border service delivery are really there. And it's a must. Without that, simply said, the EU market would not be able to generate the benefits and the positive effects that it otherwise could. In terms of financing, very important as well. We have set aside 800 million euros, which is made available now in addition to support rollout of alternative fuels infrastructure in the EU. It should trigger substantial private investments. Collaboration of this kind is needed if the rollout should be accelerated. Public investment in infrastructure needs to be accompanied by a reliable offering of vehicles and vessels to reduce uncertainty about future supply and demand. And that's particularly relevant when we talk about natural gas, where the existing infrastructure is by far not met by the adequate demand yet. But at the same time, of course, there is a lot of keenness, and I mean, we can see that there are one or two countries who have really invested into that and have positive results, while many other countries it remains quite alien still. But this is quite crucial, and I think that also the 800 million we have set aside as part of the blending call is something which hopefully will be used in order to deliver. A couple of words about batteries. Europe also needs to intensify its efforts on the storage side. Competitive battery solutions are a critical part of this transition, and for heavier vehicles there is some way to travel. On the supply side, our objective is to bring the manufacturing of batteries back to Europe. We would like to ensure our competitive advantage in the race for the next generation batteries. It's also clear that you always have to assess, and at least we have to assess it from the perspective, what is in it for Europe and how can Europe benefit from that? And it's absolutely clear that if we are incentivizing the use of batteries where all of it is produced outside Europe, then you ask the question, what is in it for Europe? So it is clear that with the technology that we have and with the high level of engineering that is present in Europe, we would be definitely able to produce also very competitively the batteries. And that's why I think that these kind of incentives are important, and also the kind of work that we do in order to help also to develop the research and to put that forward. Because under this initiative, we want to work with stakeholders to support industry-led initiatives. We will develop support measures for research, deployment, manufacturing of the next-generation battery cells and battery packs in the EU. So, ladies and gentlemen, different powertrain options have to complement each other in an intelligent manner in the future. The increased use of alternative fuels technologies should ensure maintaining our global technological leadership and competitiveness in the long term, while adequately contributing to the needed reductions in vehicle emissions. This is the key to the long-term competitiveness of EU. And perhaps I will also add, before I finish, one more element, which is, of course, the digitalization and the power of digitalization, which is currently happening across the board in all of the transport sectors. And it's also clear that using also better the possibilities what the generation of big data and also the further digitalization of transport can bring is definitely something that can also have a positive impact in developing further the alternative power trains. So, from the Commission point of view, we are looking forward to continuing our very good and beneficial cooperation with the European manufacturers and their suppliers. Thank you very much for your kind attention.